students, welcome to ARK Reflections IAS newspaper analysis of the day. So we'll quickly glance the important articles from today's Hindu newspaper, like starting from the OPEC hikes the oil production. So why the OPEC need to hike the oil production? One of the important reasons is the sudden exit of UAE from the OPEC and OPEC plus. So that's why to meet the aggregate demand and to make the stabilization in the global markets, so other OPEC countries like the Russia, Saudi, and they increase the oil production. Okay, one of the important news because it has a huge impact on India also. Like as the UAE came out of this organization, so many of the experts are commenting that so the outing of this UAE is very good for India so that we can make a direct deal with the UAE for its future energy needs. So that is one important news article. And the second, the government issues the childhood diabetes care norms. So the government has taken a special norms for the childhood diabetes care. Like we know that how the diabetes is prevailing in mostly in the children, and it also enabled the 4T's formula. And these are the four important T's you have to observe in the child. So, and also we have to report those when the symptoms are clearly visible in the children, like the tiredness or like thinning. So, like that, we'll discuss all these things. And the next, AI power left unchecked. The corporate control of the AI raises the questions about the accountability. Very, very important article in the editorial today is about the AI, how the AI is dominating the whole world. Even it is getting more powerful than the democratically elected governments. If these democratically elected governments will not come together and put a check on these AI companies, because their capabilities and their power is multiplying and amplifying every day by day, including because we have seen the usage of the AI in multiple sectors, being in the military, being in the immigration, being in the surveillance, or being in almost every major sector. So it is creating a huge differences. Even it is creating the job oustings, or like it is creating the huge labor market imbalances. So that is what the author said. This is the immediate critical problems where the governments have to address. So we'll also discuss about that article. And next important articles. So today we have the counting. So we'll see by the end of the day. So in the around 4 states like the Tamil Nadu, Bengal, Assam. So and also these places and the Union Territory. So here we see the West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Assam, Puducherry. We have the whole verdict by the end of today. And next comes to the international affairs. So US choices are impossible because we have seen that Iran has publicly issued this 4-point agenda formula to deal with the any future ceasefire and the peace talks. So it has submitted formally. It has submitted its 4 major points of peace treaty like conditions to the Pakistan, and Pakistan has formally sent that 14 points to US. So we'll also discuss about the important points among that 14 points. What are the important points are highlighted and why the Iran proposes this 14-point formula. Okay, so that's important news. And here also we can see one classical news. Nepal raises the Lipu Lake issue. India says no historical record. So very soon, Indian government was in the coordination with the Chinese government for the Manas Sarovar Yatra. So the Manas Sarovar was in the Mount Kailash is in Tibet Autonomous Region of China. So the passage, the Lipu Lake corridor, which is in Indian, but from long time, this China, so Nepal, it is claiming that it is a sovereign territory of Nepal, and it is quoting the historical agreements like the Treaty of Sugali Treaty and all. So that is important. And again, our Ministry of External Affairs, they clarified that it is an internal and integrated part of India very strongly. So here we can see that Nepal has issued the consents to both India and China over the next season of the Kailash Manas Sarovar Yatra. So it has issued the consent to both. Nepal has the newly elected government of Nepal. It has issued the consents about the Kailash Manas Sarovar Yatra to the both governments, to China and India. So that is also important. And next, so we can see when it comes to the editorial, this editorial is very, very important on to the point. Like like AI and a gathering storm of unchecked power. We'll discuss that editorial for sure. And also keeping India's carbon money at home. So now from January 1st, like the EU is brought the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So it is levying the carbon taxes on the imports which is coming into the European market, but safeguarding its domestic companies. So it is huge unequal imbalance between the both. Why? Because if it is if it is protecting and not levying the taxes on its domestic companies, but levying the carbon taxes on the foreign companies, like main exporting countries. Recently, India has signed the FTA, major FTA with the EU. So these companies who are exporting to the EU has to pay huge carbon taxes, which means the exports from India to the EU become more expensive. So it will benefit the regional companies. So why there is this kind of huge imbalance or the climate sovereignty or the climate imbalance? So how the India has to react? So that is the what this article is about. We'll discuss this clearly. And next, here we can see the in the recent elections, the observed trend, the most important observation was the increasing in the voting turnout. There is a huge increase even in the any of these four states and the Puducherry. We can see the huge voter turnout is increased. So which we can say that the confidence of the democracy among the people is getting increased. Yeah, that is what we can observe. Except in some instances, but mostly in the recently we can see that. So we can see in the table like Assam in the 2011 it was 76%, but in 2026 it is 85%. Kerala it is 75.26%, now it is 78.27%. Tamil Nadu 78.27%, now it is 85.15%. And the West Bengal, the recent elections, in the previous elections, the comparison in the previous elections, especially in 2011, here they have given it is 84.72%, but now 92.447%. 92.47%. Puducherry 86.19 and 89.85%. We can see the increased voter turnout in the recent elections. That is very important. The government on the major diplomatic outreach in May, because so now there is a huge upcoming of the greater international events. So Modi and Jaishankar to host the counterparts from BRICS, Quad, Africa, Europe, and the Indian Ocean region. So this is the very important. So in the May there are upcoming major global events which related to the BRICS, Quad, Africa, Europe, and the Indian Ocean region. So these are the important articles. So which we can see. Yeah. Okay, we will go to the detailed discussion. So US choices are impossible. Like why the so recently what happened? So Iran has issued 14 points for upcoming peace talks. So upcoming peace talks. So what it has said, any kind of upcoming peace talks or any negotiations will be held in the view of these 14 points. And these official 14 points are submitted to Pakistan. And these Pakistan has sent to US. And these 14 points of agenda is under the review of the US government. So as a response to the that 14 points. So what Trump said, he didn't check it properly, but it's telling that these 14-point demands are hugely impossible. So we'll just see what are these 14 points and what are the important 14 points. You can see they have kept the 30-day timeline, that is one important, and permanent end to war. Permanent end to war, not just at Iran, not just at Iran, but all the friends, but at all the friends. All the friends in the sense, so Israel is fighting a war with in the Gaza and also in the Lebanon. So as a proxy of Iran, so they are fighting the wars, and also in the Yemen, Houthis. So what Iran is telling that, so permanent end to war and the end of the war from all the friends, not just in Iran, but also in the Lebanon, also in the Gaza, and also these places where the proxy wars are happening. And US military withdrawal. This is also very important, very important point. What it is telling that complete US withdrawal from where? From the region surrounding the Iran. Complete US withdrawal from the region surrounding the Iran, like the Bahrain, Qatar, and these all places US have to withdraw, and all its bases in UAE, Saudi Arabia, and any other places surrounded by Iran. So from these places, the US must withdraw. And now there are heavy sanctions of Iran. So US must unfreeze these all sanctions. So it should allow the Iran to do its business with any country whichever it want, and it has to defreeze the funds. For example, just as previously before the sanctions, so many of the countries has to import oil and gas from the Iran. So many lot of dollars, in the billions of dollars, which are in the accounts of foreign banks, were stuck because of the US sanctions. So now Iran want to defreeze those sanctions. And next important, war repatriations, it's okay. Then Strait of Hormuz governance, ending the naval blockade. Whatever the naval blockade which was implementing by the US Navy right now, without allowing any single small ship from the Iranian ports to any other country, especially it is hurting the China to deep core, because China is hugely dependent on the Iran's gas and oil. So now what US is not allowing a single ship to leave the Iranian ports. So what the Iran is telling that US must, means unanimously, like it has to lift the sanctions or the blockade around its seaports. And next, the nuclear difference. So very important, right? This is the hot topic of the contention between the Iran and US. When it comes to the nuclear, so it is ready to freeze on the nuclear enrichment up to the nuclear weapon scale for 15 years. For 15 years, it want to keep it a hold, but it should be allowed to enrich the nuclear fuel to the NPT level. NPT level in the sense the 3.6%. So the 3.6% of the enrichment. Why this 3.6% of the enrichment? Because we also know in the nuclear, civil nuclear energy, so we need 5% to 20%. This is the ideal nuclear enrichment, very good for the civil nuclear energy or the energy production, nuclear energy production. So that's why it is asking 3.6% of the NPT level enrichment should be allowed, but the weapon grade enrichment will be hold for 15 years or so. So these are the important demands which the Iran has kept in front of the US. Now US have to respond these 14 points. In that 14 points, these are important, like US should vacate completely from the region surrounding the Iran, and also it should lift all the sanctions, blockade on the Iranian naval ports, Iranian financial institutions, and all. It should be allowed to trade with any other person, and it so US must make sure to promise to end the proxy wars, not just at the direct front of the Iran and US, but other fronts also, like the Lebanon and Israel, Gaza, Houthis, these are all the things. So next, yeah, these are the important highlights of this 14-point plan of Iran. So next comes to the highlight, major star article of the today's AI and a gathering storm of unchecked power. So what happened? So recently on April 19th, so there is one book called, so there is a major AI company, Palantir. So this is also like the Claude, so like the Anthropic, OpenAI, it is also one of the important AI analytics company, very important AI analytics company. This CEO, he has written a book called Technological Republic. Technological Republic. So in this book, what he highlighted, very important, in this book, what he highlighted in this Technological Republic, so at present, so AI is more than a democratic governments, or the governments should be in coordinated with the AI companies. So AI is not just a technology. Now the AI is a more political, and because the future governments, simply in one point what he's telling, that in April 19 there is one tweet. The author started with one tweet where in April 19 the Palantir CEO, he released one book, Technological Republic. In the Technological Republic, the summary was posted in its Twitter account. In that Twitter account, what happened? So it is important. The important point is, so the future governments is not just relying on a moral democratic values anymore. It has to rely on the AI also. It has to rely on the AI softwares. It's not just on the moral capabilities of a system. So what this AI can do? The AI, if it's also says that, so these democratic governments relying on the AI or the softwares, these softwares can also bring the actively using in military. So the military usage of AI is high. So that is what he's telling. The important point he tells was the future governments should not committed or concentrated just stick to its democratic values. It has no choice that they have to depend on the softwares. And what kind of softwares? Softwares like AI. When they depend on these softwares and with these AI, they will use them for the manufacturing. What kind of manufacturing? They can use this AI for the manufacturing of weapons. Now the real question is, who will manufacture? It's not that we have to manufacture these weapons with AI or not. The main question is, who will manufacture what kind of weapons and where they will use? That is the real question. So future governments will not just depend on the democracy or other kind of values. It has to depend on some softwares like AI. And these AI softwares will be used for every important government decisions, including the weapon manufacturing. When the weapon manufacture, the question is whether the governments have to allow the AI for the weapon manufacturing or not. The real question is, who will manufacture what kind of weapons, on what purposes, or on which parties we will use these weapons. And now this is a classical contention between, so who controls this AI, whether we have to give the complete control to these technological companies which run on just for profits, or the democratic governments which they have to make an active role in controlling and regularizing the democracy. That is what the author's introduction is. So the other was, in simply he is telling that, so countries should unite and regularize and tighten the control around the AI. Why? Because the AI is concentrated with very few companies which are profit oriented, not the value oriented. The value oriented is our democratic governments and democratic system. There are value oriented, and these profit oriented companies, definitely they keep the profit as a first come as with the values. So that is what we'll discuss in more deep. So what the author has raised some important situations in the article. So when it comes to the AI, inadequate regulation and self-governance, as we see the major AI companies, so what they are making their own ethical principles. They are making their own ethical principles. So whom they have to call it as a black, whom they have to call it as a colored. So these all depends on these internal ethical rules, not the rules given by government. All these AI companies, the biasness or whatever the conditions which are, they themselves they are keeping the ethical guidelines for their own softwares, not the governments. So that is very important. And inadequate regulations and the self-governance, as we see the recent project Glasswing. What is this project Glasswing? It's a project Glasswing is nothing but a cartel of some major tech AI companies where they want to use some particular dedicated cybersecurity softwares only for themselves. Like for example, like Claude has developed, the Anthropic company Claude has developed the AI called Mythos AI. So we have seen that one was a major cybersecurity tool which can even track the bugs even from the 27-year-old or very old softwares also. Okay, so these cybersecurity tools, it was concentrated just among the 6 to 7 tech companies. So how it can be concentrated, these major weapon tool with the 6 to 7 tech companies. So that is one thing, because main thing was the inadequate regulation and the self-governance. They themselves having the regulations and they themselves are having their governance, because the active role of the government, the democratically elected governments, were not there in these AI companies. That is the major fundamental problem what the author has upholded. So next, security and surveillance. So AI is using for security and surveillance. What kind of security? Like border security, and also the immigration purposes, the immigration purposes. When they use for the immigration purposes and the border security, what happens, especially when the immigration, we can see the huge classical debate between the biasness, because it has to identify the people. Sometimes it has to identify the people based on their facial features, color, and all. So as the data was injected by these tech companies, whatever the guidelines which they injected, whoever they have to figure out, it will figure out. So the huge discriminatory issues will come from this security and surveillance and warfare risks. Warfare risk, even the selecting the targets during the warfare also, it may trigger and target so more discriminatory ways. So that is what it is embedded in the security and surveillance works, warfare risk. Next, economic and social disruptions. So very important, like huge classical say, we can say clearly that economic and social disruption, because definitely it is replacing many of the human jobs, many human human job replacement. So this is one of the important core point. Because of the AI, many jobs are getting replaced. And also the inequality. For example, everyone, we can't afford to buy and use the pro versions of the AI. Only the rich and only the affluent people, they can use the more pro versions of AI. Because comparing to the basic version, these pro versions work much better, right? So who can afford to the pro versions? Only the people who are rich and affluent. So these kind of practices will bring more social inequality. So the rich will be more powerful with using the more pro versions of the AI, and the poorer have to use the basic versions. So they become so incapable as compared with the people who are working with the more pro versions. So it brings the human job replacement, and also deepens the social and economic inequality. Social and economic inequality, very important. Social and economic inequality. So these are the important things. Next, we can see the intellectual and property and creativity. As these AI models are trained by huge data sets, trained by huge data sets, which means it has to give. For example, it used to give a lot of creative work, even for the paintings, dances, or composing any music. It has to give a lot of data sets to feed, and they can with obviously after taking this much data, and they will generate the new ideas. So without having any conflict of interest, these AI tools are trained on huge data sets, and that huge data sets are already a property of some other persons, right? So if I composed a song, and that is my own intellectual property, and if the new AI model is trained based on my song, like me, there are 100 people, and this AI tool was trained based on these 100 people's intellectual property. Then whenever it created one new song or new composed some new thing, so who is the real owner, or the real person who is having these intellectual property, right? That is the main contention. The intellectual property issues are more, because these AI models are trained on the huge artist or many people intellectual property rights. So to whom these intellectual property rights will be assigned, that is the main concept. And the next one was, there is no alternative narrative, because there is a huge narrative brings that. So comparing to the AI, as compared to AI, so there is no alternative. No alternative. If there is no alternative, so governments are less interested to interfere in these kind of AI generation, because if they interfere, because these will have some roadblocks. So that is what, there is a huge narrative that there is no AI alternative issue was going on. Okay, so next, there is weak global governance. Weak global governance. With the weak global governance means what? Even there are some acts like the EU, so European Union AI Act. So the global governance on the AI is very limited. What will happen if the governments came together and they put so many regulations? What will happen? So the R&D, the research and development of the AI will be impacted. But still, the lack of the global coordination on the AI is very limited because all these major AI tech companies are concentrated in very few countries. Like for example, this Anthropic, ChatGPT, or OpenAI. So these kind of companies are concentrated mostly in the US, or some companies like the DeepSeek and these all the Moonshot. These are all concentrated in China, either in China or in the US or in some small companies like EU and India. So these very few, like how the nuclear weapons are concentrated in very few countries, so these AI companies also concentrated in very few countries. So that's why all the major world countries are not coming together to make the regulations. Okay, so these are the important points. So inadequate regulations and self-governance, security and surveillance in warfare risks, because the huge biasness towards when it comes to the immigration and the border surveillance, and economic and social disruptions. Already it is replacing many jobs and it is increasing the parity between the affluent and the poor. Because why? These AI is a major, like very important weapon tools, and the pro version of the AI is used by rich and affluent people, and the very basic versions will be used by normal people. The gap between the pro and the basic versions are whenever, because in the future it will be too huge, the gap. So whoever using the pro versions, they will have the more upper hand in their job and work. Next, intellectual property and creativity issues, because these AIs are trained based on multiple people's intellectual properties. So when it produces any kind of product, who will be the rightful author for those intellectual property? So next, the no alternative narrative. So it is majorly increasing that. So to AI, there is no alternative as at present. So that's what government is hesitating or getting getting hesitated to interfere in the development of the AI, because it will hinder their progress. So that is very important, because for example, if the in the future, so you, as the AI companies are more and more powerful, AI companies are there in the US. So these more powerful AI companies, they hold the major power with the US country itself. So still US can dominate the whole world and make the world into a more unipolar instead of multipolar world. So next, global governance. Still there are some acts like the EU AI Act. Still these acts itself is not enough. So the global coordination, so multiple countries coming together and then making the EU regulation. So regulations on AI was not happening as of now. So that's what the author is telling. So the important issue here, because the AI increases the social inequality, and if we leave as it is, so it will dominate the democratically elected societies. Very, very important. If we leave as it is, democratically elected societies, it will definitely dominate. So this is very important. And global coordination. The global coordination is very much needed. So this is the important summary of what the author is telling. So from this article, so what the AI is getting too powerful. If we don't control now, so it will come out of our hand, that which we can't even control. So that is what the author is cautioning. So next important, keeping the India's carbon money at home. So what happens from January 1st, Jan 1st, 2026, what happened? So the EU has enabled its carbon border adjustment mechanism. Carbon border adjustment mechanism. According to this carbon border adjusting mechanism, what, in simple story, I will tell what. So the EU, just imagine the EU as one single country. So it want to protect its pollution, okay, its skies and its environment. So what it has done, so it has kept some toll gate tax, like this carbon border adjustment mechanism. Whichever companies which they are exporting to the EU markets, they have to pay some money for the carbon. So in the form of carbon tax. Okay, this is fine. So to protect the environment, so it is asking the companies who are exporting, who are exporting to EU. So any country. So they have to pay some toll tax for carbon emissions and all, because when they manufacture some products, they emit some carbon emissions, right? So for that, it want to make that companies to pay tax before entering into the EU. So this is fine. But what it did here was, so it has not levied the same kind of tax from the companies for its domestic companies. So it is levied tax only on foreign companies, but all the domestic producers in EU, so they no need to pay any kind of special tax. Instead, they have given some allowances and some incentives. So what the here was, so on the paper it looks like very and climatically ideally climatic model, but traditionally it looks like more, it brings a more economic disparity, which means the exports to EU become more costly. Exports to EU become more costly as with the domestic production. So this is what the EU is bringing in the name of, or in the mask of, carbon, so carbon reduction mechanism or the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So simply there is very unfair thing. It is very unfair. It is more fair towards its domestic producers, but any producer from the other country, like the Indian steel manufacturer, if they want to send the steel to EU, he has to pay the carbon border adjustment mechanism fee for the EU. Okay. So now other is telling like why these companies have to pay. Instead of that, why can't we keep that money in our India itself? How we can keep that money in India itself? Those money which are paying for the European Union. So in that carbon border adjustment mechanism, so what happened here was there is one clause. What kind of clause? So it when it pay the carbon tax, carbon tax in the country of origin, in the country of origin, so it no need to pay this fee, carbon border adjustment fee. It no need to pay. Okay, so just remember this part. Here, what happened? The unequal playing field under the CBA. So what is this unequal playing field? Unequal playing field means, so it is so European companies benefiting more. European companies benefits more by paying no tax, by paying no tax, but foreign companies have to pay tax. So automatically these foreign products become more expensive when it reach to EU. So when it will lost in the competitive edge in the cost. Okay. Next important is trade law concerns. So in the trade law, so what happens in the trade law concerns? So here in the trade law concerns, according to the GATT, we have the GATT agreement, right? WTO, World Trade Agreement. So it is very unfair. According to the GATT agreement, this is very unfair that you are giving some special incentive to your domestic production, which will enhance the price competitiveness for your domestic companies. According to the World Trade Organization and the GATT agreement, this is not at all right. But still, European Union is doing. The trade law concerns are very high. And next, climatic justice and the sovereignty issue. Here, what it happened? So, if Indian companies are paying the toll tax to European Union, who will lose money? India will lose money. So, for that, what the author has proposed was one new solution called Indian Border Adjustment Mechanism (IBAM). IBAM, Indian Border Adjustment Mechanism. According to this Indian Border Adjustment Mechanism, all these companies which these companies have to pay the money to the European Union, so they will pay the tax for India itself. So India can use the tax money to for in the developing the any green technologies, So that's what the author said. Why you are allowing the Indian companies to pay money and taking the Indian money to the European like European governments or the European trade mechanism. or European tax mechanism. So instead of that, the author is telling that India should develop its own Indian border adjustment mechanism and make sure these companies to pay that taxes in India itself. And when you pay these taxes in India, according to the European Union's this carbon border adjustment mechanism, you no need to pay the tax in the EU. So like that, so there is so author is telling that India should develop its own Indian border adjustment mechanism, so that that money will be in India only. So those money will be used for the any green technology developments. So like this, so you should answer to the carbon border adjustment mechanism. Even recently, India has signed a free trade agreement with European Union. So they didn't give any exemption for India, especially when it comes to the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So even India signed a free trade agreement with EU, so they didn't give any exemption when it comes to the carbon border adjustment mechanism. Just like any country, when it comes to the European borders, so it has to pay the toll tax for this CBAM, like the carbon border adjustment mechanism. Okay. So that is one thing. Government issues guidelines for the childhood diabetes care. So what happens recently? The childhood diabetes, the diabetes cases in the childhood is increasing, and both type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. So these both cases are increasing rapidly. So what the government is taking, and the government is taking a special measure, just like now, from now, it want to make a plan, it want to give complete free package from the diabetes test kits. And if it required, it will also provide the insulin throughout their life cycle. And along with that, it will also recommend to the higher educational, higher health facilities. For example, if his problem is not treated in the local clinics, they will recommend to the so major hospitals, government hospitals in the towns, or the major hospital, like the even the national hospitals. Also, they want to recommend those cases. So that is what they want to bring, a foolproof mechanism for the diabetes issues when it comes to the childhood. So what can, like we can see this type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Like we see the type 1. So what is the type 1 diabetes? Type 1 diabetes is the diabetes when our immune system hinders the hinders or kills the insulin particles or the insulin from our liver, because usually in our, especially in the pancreas, insulin is generated. So in the type 1 diabetes, what happens when these insulin beta cells were killed by our immune system itself, or any due to or our immune system itself. So what will happen if there is no insulin? If there is no insulin, so no insulin. So what happens? This is the cell, for example. So we have the mitochondria here. So to supply the energy in the form of ATP, so when we take the food, we have the glucose will come from the food. The glucose should enter into the cell, then only we'll get the energy. If to facilitate this process, allowing the energy, like the glucose into the cell, who is the mediator here? The mediator is insulin. The insulin is the mediator. If there is no insulin, what happens? Cell won't get energy. So that is what type 1 diabetes is. So in the type 2 case, in the classical type 2 case, what happens when our cells in the type 2 cells not reacting to the insulin, not reacting to insulin. So due to the huge blood spikes, like the blood spikes, what happens over the time? Our cells became insensitive towards the insulin. So that is what the type 2 diabetes. Over the time, we have to take the insulin injections also. So this is what type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Recently, what the government has observed, these kind of cases is getting more when it comes to the children. And these children, sometimes they are getting unnoticed. So they are getting very much unnoticed. So it is impacting their health. How it is getting impacting their health? So when the people, when the children has the diabetes, usually they have these problems, like they will more often go for the restrooms and toilets, and they will, as they will go for the, they will use or urinate more, they will have to take more water, and a huge thirst issue will be high. And also because as we discussed that, so the role of insulin is to mediate, to allow the glucose from the blood to the cell. So what happens if the glucose is not entered into the cell? We don't have energy, like we don't have fuel. If we don't have fuel, what will, how we will look? We look very tired or with the fatigue. So with that, can the children able to read, or can the children able to do their daily activities, or can the children able to play in the effectively in the ground? Definitely no. So anything which hampers the growth of the children is hampers the growth of the nation. So that's what the government is taking the effective steps to provide everything from the diabetes test kits, including the insulin injections also, and also the effective healthcare through multiple stages or steps of its institutions. And next, they lose weight. They lose weight. This is also very important. So what government is telling parents, teachers, and caregivers, they should spot these kind of 40 principles. Even us, when the children having, like whether he is often going for toilet or urinating more, so obviously this is one kind of symptom of the diabetes. And the second important, as they will, so they will feel more thirst, they will drink more water. And the next, they looks very tired, and they looks very, then because of the these kind of symptoms, they lose their weight. Because what they will do, it will eat fat and thin cells, because when there is no energy, it will consume from our body muscle cells and all. So ultimately what happened, it will hamper the growth of the children. So government has given this 4T's rule to observe in the children. When the children has suffering with these 4T's, means it means they are in the prone, they are in the radar to either they had the diabetes, or very soon they will have the diabetes. These 4T's they should observe, and they should report to the nearby health centers. So that is what the government has mentioned. Next important thing, just a small news article, Mission Drishti. So this is the first privately owned Galaxy Eye. This is a Bangalore-based Galaxy Eye space startup. What it has done, this Galaxy Eye, they have launched the Mission Drishti. Mission Drishti is a 190 kilogram satellite. It's a 190 kg satellite. Recently, it's launched from Falcon 9 rocket, SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. So, what kind of applications it will use? This is the first space startup in India launching this kind of, means a satellite with the two different and very fine payloads. Like it has two fine payloads. One is electro-optical payload, electro-optical, and also synthetic aperture radar. So this is two of the very unique payloads which is in a satellite, and it was launched by the Galaxy Eye, which is a Bengaluru-based space startup. So recently it has launched, and they will use for, because with these kind of two payloads, so it will use all weather, any kind of weather, whether storms or any kind of all weather, and also 365 days, 24 hours, it will give the surveillance capability. So very important and major leap, major global step for the Indian space startup, so which has launched these big size satellite. So within the space with two effective payloads, it was good for the prelims part of view, because the mission Rishti was a first. The mission Rishti was the first important major space tech satellite by the Indian major space tech called Galaxy Eye. It's a Bangalore-based space tech. So it has launched these mission Drishti satellites through its through the Falcon 9 rocket of SpaceX. So these are the important news articles of the day. So we'll meet tomorrow with the tomorrow's news article. Thank you for being with us, and please be subscribed for the future updates. Thank you.